We see that.
Good evening, welcome to Corporate Service Committee meeting held February 3rd, 2025. Call to order. Moved by Neri, seconded by Jason, that the Corporate Service Committee meeting be opened at 7 p.m. All in favor? Carried. Adoption of agendas. That moved by Donna, seconded by Steve, that the agenda for the Corporate Service Committee meeting February 3rd, 2025 be approved. All in favor? Carried. Adoption of previous minutes. Moved by Jason, seconded by Steve, that the minutes of the Corporate Service Committee meeting held November 28th, 2024 be adopted as presented. All in favor? Carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Presentation and delegations, none. Items for discussion, and I'd like to say welcome to Antoine Boucher, Ferris, and do the engineering report for us.
Thank you. I wanted to just take it over.
You take over.
So, not to make it too formal, I'll try to walk through the process of the report. And any questions, just don't hesitate and ask me as you go through it. On a biannual basis, we always do bridge inspections, and then the last one was just completed on August 15th. HB Engineering was basically completing the bridge. So we usually rate those by BCI indexing. So this one was rated at a 37. And it's essentially something that starts to identify the need of replacement. This particular bridge is a circa 1930, so it was built in the 1900s. May have been when the route to Ottawa probably crossed Trunk Road. And then they're the typical type of bridges that you see everywhere throughout that route. I understand that the road as it is on Trunk Road is a single lane. And that as we're considering the replacement in the future, that a 2-lane would be considered. This bridge, any bridge today, it's referred to as Bridge 08. And typical dimensions or location. So it's located at approximately 1.1 kilometers on the Trout Pond Road. It's on lot 23, concession 9, and it's within the municipality. And it's crossing right over Blue Seal Creek. Typical dimension. So it's not a very, very big bridge. It's got a length of about 3.6 meters. The width right now is about 5.5. Usually a legal 2-lane road would be 6 meters. So it's a little bit just below that. And it doesn't have a lot of clearance. So when we take the measurements from the bottom of the creek to the underneath of the deck itself, we got about 175 meters. Then we measure to the top of the travel portion, and we got about 2.2. So it's pretty shallow section. The way it's constructed, it's actually an open footing concrete structure. And when we look at the pictures that are attached, those are coming from the inspection reports. You can see the condition of the bridge itself, where the approach guide rails are in pretty poor condition. We call them more specifically the parapet wall. But it shows that, through the age, there's a lot of deterioration. The inspection has kind of flagged that the barrel, which is the third picture, which is the inside, is actually in good condition, means that structurally, even though we see a little bit of rebar, it's still at strength. So it's not like we have to close the bridge, but it's simply that the deterioration is really increasing. So the approach barriers are really concerning. The safety factor with the fact that it's a 2-lane road going into a 1, that kind of raises some concerns. And when we think about it as well, we have a reference under the asset management plan, refers to the OSIM report, and then it would kind of flag and identify this bridge as a 2025, 2020, So it's one of the next ones that if the municipality is able to consider a replacement, that this would be a good candidate. On my page 3 of the report, some of the site constraints. So when we look at the bridge in itself, we know for a fact that this road has to be closed. So whenever the construction come in, that's one of the concerns. So to find a method that's relatively quick is important, so that when we do the closure, we don't do a closure that's going to last extremely long. I understand that the detours are feasible, but then again, that's always a factor. The existing hydraulic opening for this structure as well is it's about a 3 by 175 meters. During the survey, however, we noted that the water level came up. So we started, and we came back. There was a small rain event, so there was some fluctuation in the water level. But as far as I'm concerned or recall, like there's no history of that area flooding. So I don't believe, like in all these years, that we've ever seen water overtopping the deck. But what happens usually when we do design of bridges, when there are existing bridges, we always have a common practice, which is not necessarily to reduce the hydraulic capacity. And generally speaking, what we deal with when we get approvals is that generally the approving bodies, they would want us to also increase it. So sometimes we talk about the effect of climate change and climate change. More recently, what it's done is that there's a bit more, the intensity of the storms are a bit higher and they're a bit more frequent. So on the long run, on a 50 years, we may see more flow in that area. I couldn't predict, but that's the way we talk about that. We've started the investigation of but we don't have the soils report yet. But one of the things that we found out as well is that the stream bed is soft soils. And the geotechnical investigation was kind of interesting. It tells us a history. But as we go on the profile that we see that, we're a bit of in a sag, there's a bit of a valley. And further up on the approaches, when we drive it, we can see bedrock. So they would have blasted rock, and what they would have done, they would have simply pushed the bedrock, the blasted rock from the bedrock, pushed it on both sides of the bank. So what we found, and the report will confirm the depth, but what we found is like the road's got about a 4 feet, 1.2 meter of materials sitting on that blasted rock. But when we went and poked through below that, and we saw some soft soils, basically. So further down the road, there's soft soils. But in that area, over the course of the years, there's no signs of frost heaves. The earth's not moving. So we know that the surface is pretty stable. So we're confident that, above the blasted rock, we are kind of in a solid state. But one of the things as well that's going to come out from the geotech report is that if we were to raise or increase the elevation by more than 2 feet, that overall that would start to maybe impact the overall way that the soils would settle. So when we're considering this, like thinking that maybe the final design, like not raising much more than 2 feet, it's probably the best. And the report will clarify that specific. So that kind of gives you a little perspective. I was going to go into discussion on the kind of alternatives, because ultimately there's different ways to build a bridge, and there's different costs associated to different methods. So one of the first method is a little bit like similar to the project that was done on Development Road. There was a multi-plate structure. This one is actually the one that would be roughly equivalent to the opening of the structure that we have. It gives us a 5.4 meter open area, so it's actually very relevant to the same area of the existing structure. And then you can see the scale of a person standing beside it, but kind of what the height is. You remember when I mentioned like the 175 to 2 meters? That's kind of that height. So you can see like roughly this would be the type of structure that would be compared to not increasing capacity, but kind of equivalent. However, one of the challenges, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, is the fact that this structure is basically, it's not an, I'll call it open bottom. but this is one option.
These pipes are metal?
So the multi-plate is it's a steel, it's a metal.
Yeah.
And typically what we call them multi-plates because there's a bunch of plates that come in and then you assemble them together. So you put them all together with bolts and then you assemble them together. And in this particular case, like we've done on Development Road, we would make sure that it would be polymer coated. So like a black tar, so that it would not corrode any road because of the type of water dealing.
It gives you an extra 25 years to pipe life.
Yeah.
Than the ones that are like all one.
Yeah, well, they're just the galvanized ones,
Right.
the polymer coating protects the pipe.
We got
And
really fine water.
And sometimes the one that are in one piece, they would be a little smaller than that. So maybe you start like there's a certain size that the one that are in one piece, they would be a circular pipe, like a 6 foot, 8 foot. Sometimes it goes a little bigger, but then they have a process like a method where they swash it. And then that's becoming the oval pipe. But these ones are actually, that's what you see those little bolts on them as the detail. Similar to the one on the road, basically. The next one is it's a concrete box culvert that we wanted to bring for discussion as well. Relatively simple. We see them quite everywhere. We're able to have sizes that would fit what we're looking at. So they make those into sizes that fits. So that we confirmed. We usually need to do a bit of an opening, just like that, the adjacent picture for those. So ultimately, there's a bit of a wing wall embankment on the side. A third option kind of thing would be something that starts to sit on concrete footings. So the picture you see has got concrete footings, and then you're putting a steel plate bridge. But it does require excavation of everything that's there, and then you're working with them. So the first three are kind of working in within that water course. Then we jump into different alternatives, kind of 4 and 5. 4 and 5 are basically similar, but 4 is a prefab sections of concrete that would come in, and they would come and sit on footings. You would put, in this particular case, the width of these sections are up to 2.5 meters. We need about a 7.5, so there'd be 3 sections. We drop 3 sections together. So that's what we call the rigid frame, and then we move on to the modular steel deck. That's another alternative where you need to put in a footing foundation. In this case, it's more the image towards the left. You don't need to put piles and go down to bedrock. So we would have like a substructure that would be a typical footing, and then ultimately a deck is dropped on top. 4 and 5 are usually something where you work outside and behind the existing structure on the road component. And then 1, 2, and 3, you have to remove what's there, and you're working within the water bed. So
are you going from least expensive to most expensive?
not necessarily, because I think in this case, if I'm talking costs, I would say that the number 2 is less expensive than the first one.
Okay.
And the first and the third might be kind of very close together. I would believe, in my opinion, that number 4 would be a bit more expensive, and that 5 would be less than 4.
Okay.
Yeah, I could have done
Yeah.
it. So when I say that 1, 2, and 3 are kind of, you're working in the water, there's a bit of a disadvantage, but during construction, here it reads that structure 1 and 2 would have the additional scope. So it should be really 1 and 2 and 3. Sorry, kind of a mistake there. So the ones where you have to work with water, then the disadvantage to them is that you have to implement the environmental protection at the ends of the structure. So you have to protect the water course. You've got to install a dewatering system. Most times when you're doing the working in water, you've got to control that water flow. So either you put, there's different methods, right? But you have to control the water. So the dewatering is sometimes flagged with the approval office. So DFO, conservation, maybe FNR would flag those as potential concerns. So As soon as you become an in-water work, you have windows of construction restrictions. If you're not in water work, you can kind of do the work pretty much anytime. Obviously, there's more excavation and removal in that case. The entire existing bridge has to be removed. Then you have to demolish the entire bridge, and then that's including all the wing wall and everything that's there. There always the potential risk of sub-excavation due to subsoils, because you're starting to create like a new footing foundation, or you may be kind of disturbing the water course. So that's a risk. The soil report might talk to that a little bit more, but that's just a general risk. You do need to place some bedding material, which is remove what's there and put some, so you're working in the water course, essentially. And then for that section, like usually then you start seeing like a riprap that's introduced in the water course, and stone, river stone, we call it as well. Those are kind of additional work related to 1, 2, and 3. But generally speaking, like all bridges will have the following. They will have some sort of the third and fourth have a little less environmental impact and protection, but they will all have like road closure, partial excavation to full excavation, and then they will have some, in a second case already, there's no in-water work that's scheduled. And then in those other cases out of water, they're partially demolished. You've got to install new footings for the road bank. You got to place the superstructure. You got to place backfill, road, and sub-excavation. Then you got to install, in all cases, you got to install traffic barriers for the new bridges and the approach barriers. And in all cases, at the end for the finishing, you have to either pave or surface street road. So that gives you maybe the 3 options and some of the ins and outs. I don't know if you have questions or you want me to talk a little bit more about the approval process.
I would like to ask you a couple of questions. Where you say, it's only single lane. And we will be making it double lane, right? The double lane bridge. Is there any issue with that and the neighboring property? Is there any reason that the municipality would have to go on to the neighbor's property there?
So when we think about it, like we did a survey of the bridge on the profile, and we kind of see that the general alignment of the structure is well placed with the center of the road. So generally speaking, we have a 20-meter right of way, 66 feet. So because the right of way is 20 meters, 66 feet, even if we were to widen the 2 edges out from a 5.5 to a 7.5, we would not go on the outside of the existing road allowance. So that means that there's no impact in that widening to the adjacent properties. There's not going to be encroachment. So we don't have to be concerned of any, if the question becomes, is there potential encroachment? I would say the answer is no, there's not going to be.
No encroachment. And to do the testing, did you have to access the neighbor's property? Was there any reason?
No, I don't believe even, I'm not sure if when, because we have a truck and a rig and a drill that came in. So I don't believe that they even had to use the driveway of the
I think it
nearby
was the
property.
initial that she's referring to, the initial survey.
Oh, okay, so perhaps that's what we're talking about. So at one point when we took the elevations, what happened was that we wanted to go take some elevation in the creek to make sure we knew the water elevation. So we went in a certain distance, not sure what it is. We might have went in like 15 meters to take some water elevation in the creek with the survey instrument.
Yeah. And I understand that sometimes you have to do that, but I'm just going to suggest maybe perhaps the next time to let the people know.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's necessary to go on the property, just let them know then.
Do we not have 66 feet in the water course too? Like a road?
So if there's with the Blue Creek alignment, I don't really know what who owned what, that creek or Blue Creek might be going 100% within private lands, like when it's outside the roads.
Right.
I mean, it's definitely not a bad practice to inform someone, but it's yeah. So we'll bring that up to their attention.
I'm just suggesting that you do.
Yeah.
If you have to access private property, then just let them know you are, or.
Yeah.
And I think it makes a big difference to people when they're asked or said we're going to do it.
Okay.
That's all.
We had retained someone to do the survey work, so we can pass that on to them. Definitely
Okay,
not an issue. That's good.
thank you.
And then is there like quotes or ballpark figures for each of these?
So in a sense, I don't have, like, I have some numbers to talk about. Kind of give you a little bit of a sense of the cost difference in some alternatives. But essentially what it is right now is like into the approval process, we've got to kind of dwell down to which option may be feasible or not feasible. And that's one of the things I was going to talk about a little bit, that there's one or two options that are somewhat red flags. If I speak to the Conservation Authority, DFO, and those authorities, they're starting to kind of have certain pushes against certain types of designs. Because certain designs, like in this case, it's an open bottom river, in a sense, the creek. And I can talk to that briefly, but so under consultation, what we have is we're going to have something with the Conservation DFO and our with the Conservation Authority. We already engaged into a preliminary discussion for this bridge with Mr. Kepa from the Water Resources. And then in that discussion, what was recommended was that we would bring all these other persons to the table and do like a group meeting, where like we would touch on every point required. But generally speaking, with the Conservation Authority, there's been a keen interest in hydraulics whenever we talk about flows and capacity of the structures. And from preliminary discussions, that closed bottom structures are kind of unlikely to be approved, generally speaking. That's where we're coming from. So we can say when we talk about the general cost of the true structure, if I tell you that very briefly that the box culvert itself, without the wing wall, without the foundation on the bottom and so forth, just that structure itself is in the range of the 115. You're going to do the excavation. When I start looking at the other type of basically precast concrete sections, they jump in the 265 kind of cost. So there's a big jump in cost, but essentially it may kind of push away the arch pipe design and the full like open sort of box culvert design. So instead of going like very, very deeply into giving you a cost for those, I think it's very important to make sure we have the authorities on our side with the design we recommend. And then say, okay, out of the we cancel these options because of these restrictions, and then we're able to limit ourselves to these three options, and then have a cost to discuss. Okay. So DFO also they will be required to do a request for review. This is something that we will be kind of looking at working with FRI. FRI is an agency that does a lot of the species at risk and that kind of work as well. So
Is there a certain time that you can work on that only?
the approvals?
Yeah.
The approvals we would start right away.
No, but
The construction.
yeah.
So the option 1, 2, 3, because you're working in water, there's a very tight window, because absolutely, they're gonna identify like cold water, warm water, and they're gonna identify if you can, like from what period to what period can you do the work. What we may be, and I think that's why those options, they're red flagging a lot of approvals when we talk to the conservation authorities, when we talk to the FOs, the species at risk, the how you're gonna dewater. All these becomes red flag usually. And they may, like I'm referring to the HADD approval. There's all sorts of terminologies in there, but harmful alteration, disruption of and destruction of fish habitats. So those are the things that they would potentially red flag for us if we start to do like in water work. But if we don't do in water work and we work outside the bank, then that window is not as much of a concern.
And it would only be Conservation Authority, not the MNR, would they?
That's right. So MNR is actually very unlikely. I have a little mention on that. So the thing is with MNR is that they administer the Lakes and Rivers Improvement Act and the Public Land Act. So most likely, if the bridge was breaching or neighboring Crown lands, then we would need to get their approvals. But in this case, I don't believe that's the case. I know the neighbors on one side. I think the neighbors on the other as well. I don't believe there's any Crown land in that area. So since it's very unlikely that there's Crown land on either the north or the south, then it would be, but we still have to circulate to them to get clearance. So that would be their part. There's an additional consultation with Transportation Canada, just in case they would say, is it navigable? Maybe with a little canoe. But this is kind of very unlikely. There's also the component for the Indigenous, I'm on page 7 of all, sorry, about the Indigenous consultation, which is most likely a requirement when we get funded, federal, provincial, but when we get funding like in-house, it's not as much of a requirement, but I think it could be a good practice. We have the contacts, we can circulate. One of the things that was also identified is the fact that all of these requirements are because it's the municipal environmental assessment requirement that we have to follow. So they're going to kind of trigger these that, did you do a check on cultural heritage? Well, there's someone that we may be working with, there's a particular consultant that I mentioned in there, which is consultant Matrix Heritage, that we could engage and it could help us do a level 1 report. And essentially, it's kind of a desktop exercise, kind of identifying that these structures are, although circa 1930, they were just the typical, they just dropped them everywhere. And it's not really a heritage bridge. What would heritage bridge mean is that we have to rebuild it the same way. So I think we can get away from that. But once we do that clearance, then we can say, okay, it's confirmed. We are good to go. So those are mainly all the approval requirement that we have to go through, and then the timing window is still possible. Like we can get those things done. Where to go from there? Is there any general questions or?
Just a question on, so obviously, the approvals will be the approvals, we'll wait for feedback, we'll do all that. From the day we close the road until the day that we anticipate being able to open the road with a new bridge, what's that general time frame?
I think at this point, if we said that we had about a 2-week window, if we do a full in-water work, I believe it's going to take a little longer. If we look at the other 2 alternatives, and that's something we can talk about as well, like when we lay out like the in-water work. See, in-water work's interesting, but like when we dealt with Development Road, we had an advantage because that structure had been moved in 2 locations. So the dewatering was simple. We just basically rerouted the water through the existing and we built a new one beside. So it was a simple process. So we went in, dug, installed, dropped a new one in, and then after that we removed the old. So I think it was about a 2-week process. But in this case, the dewatering is a bit more complex because with the alignment of the creek, you probably don't want to dig beside So that would trigger a lot of challenges. So that would take some time. So I would say you're probably around a 3-week minimum. But the other method, you would save a good week less in time. So I would say if everything's well scheduled, it would probably be done in 2 weeks.
And I don't know the properties that abut it, and if they're all private, fair enough, probably won't work, but is there a possibility of building a structure beside this? Routing the road, just changing the structure and the road of the road, and then demolishing? I don't know, like,
They're private, so.
it's both private?
Yeah.
And you got bedrock on the one side or both sides, so you wouldn't be able to shift the road.
Yeah, fair enough, I was just wondering if we can eliminate having to close the road,
But, you know, I think Antoine's leading up to a different option where we're not in water work, it's gonna be the 2-week,
yeah,
so.
yeah, fair enough. That, yeah, I have the sense that's where he's leading us.
And at the same time, like when we get to the tendering process at one point, like we ask the contractor, like, you know, in the, like, you know, what would be your kind of timing, and then we can evaluate it better. They may have a kind of, you know, different opinion, but I believe that, you know, it's feasible to get this road done in the 2 weeks. Now, mind you, that means closure. There's a bit of prepping in advance, and there's a bit of ongoing at the end. So the timing of, like, for say having the paving company show up and then pave the surface is not in that 2 weeks. The
Right.
2 weeks is mostly like coming in, excavation, close the road, replace what's there, build, and then reopen. And you're driving across, but it's a little rough. So you're reopened, but at
It's
one
passable
point,
at least.
exactly.
It'll be the same with the rest of the trunk road.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm sure you're getting to it, but part of the exercise and what we're going through today is because of the municipal cost environmental assessment. So we have to look at all of the different options that are available to us and then figure out which one is the best one. But, and I'm sure you'll speak to it, but just making sure we understand the Schedule A versus, hopefully we fall under Schedule A, but
Yes, I have something under, well, I kind of talked about the hydraulics and some of the constraints. I talked about the geotech where I say that we have about the maximum raise of about 600. The geometrics talks about the fact that we would very likely, you know, deal with this at 5.5 meters. Honestly, if you replace the existing bridge for the existing structure, you might save 20% or 15%. So when you're doing this kind of work, it's not really worth keeping existing. So you would definitely do that without an impact on the. You would still work within the rule allowance. So a 7.5 is roughly the width that we'd be looking for. And when I talk about under engineering, that second paragraph under page 8, I would look at it as a there's the A+, but I would look at it as an A. So an A is generally speaking like a pre-approved process, but we should have to keep all these. You know, did we investigate for species at risk? Did we do proper consultation? Essentially, I don't think it would warrant an open house meeting. But if council wished to say, you know, we could say we do an open house meeting for an hour or two if there was concern, questions, or present the alternative to the public. It could be done, but it's not necessarily warranted. But the consultation is very important, and the fact that it's interesting because if you change the scope of what was there, that's when it triggers a schedule fire usually. But in this case, we're changing something from a single lane to a 2-lane, which is not really problematic. You know, so this widening is usually something that everybody will benefit from. And also under engineering, like the structure that we want to build is to make sure that we meet like the CL 625, which means that every truck can drive over top. Because I understand that the highway could be closed, it could be used as a road. So those are the main basically characteristics of the engineering design. And the OSIM report that we have talks about a rough numbers of why exactly 444K. I don't know, that's the price. There's a little bit of a breakdown. But generally speaking, I think like I know we've talked about the market ups and downs lately where we don't exactly know what the price of steel might go with, depending what the source is. But I think a rough figure budget of keeping in the 400,000 is very reasonable to do all the work and purchase all the material. And the exact structure recommended, again, that will come out of the detailed design once we get all the clearances from the approving authority. The last picture is on page 9 and so forth, kind of give you an idea of what we would do for this particular bridge to do all the environmental control of making sure we don't have any fines falling into the river. So that kind of shows you like the last bridge construction, we did pictures from it. Very similar to, it's not the first bridge we've done. Again, the box culvert, just to say that for what we need, for the size we need, it would be about 150,000 just the concrete for the box culvert, but the approval would be challenging. However, the wing wall cost very likely to vary between 70 and 40 to 70. And there's also a guide rail cost, so that's probably going to be a 65. Then you add construction and so forth. So when you add all these costs together, it's still not like cheap. The multi-plate, this is actually a picture from Development Road. So we could pull the cost from what we paid last time when we actually did the full project to get mind you, I think it was 2018. So prices today have changed. But again, the dewatering and the fact that those would be the challenges with that project. And it could make it that the road closure would be longer. The next one is a precast. In our case, we only have 3 sections, not 4. This was a project done in Calvin that we did, and there would be the 3 sections of 2.5 to make the 7.5. But just those 3 sections would cost about 265,000. Then you need the footing, which I would assume would be in the range of 60, the guide rail at 65, and then the construction and so forth. This is a picture of what it kind of would look like. And then whether you have wing walls of kind of a retaining wall on the 2 sides is a requirement as well. And then you go to the next option with it, which is essentially what we may be leaning towards in a sense, but that's where you would be excavating the road above water, install those. It's kind of a very likely an L-shaped concrete precast that comes in, drop both sides. And then that would be sitting maybe a certain elevation above the blasted rock. So the advantage we have is that because we have blasted rock, we would remove some of what's existing, put some type 2B. And the geotechnical report is probably going to be kind of leading towards that somewhat. So where you can have those 3 sections of steel, you could drop and then put guide rail on the side, and you get kind of the look of the finished product of what it would look. Yeah, so this gives you an overall of where we're at, where I think we're going to lead towards with the findings.
So you gave us a number of scenarios with the bridge when what we could do. So our figure is 444,000. That's 400. Right?
That's what should be.
Yeah. So when you look at all of the different ones, and of course, we want to have the best.
Yep.
Least amount of money, and so then, are you going to recommend which one would be the best for that road?
Yeah, so I mean, what we can do when we get to the final design is that we can talk about the confirmation for the open bottom versus closed bottom, and is it really what we're getting from the authorities that the approval of the closed bottom structures, which is option 1, 2, 3 here in this case, are kind of rejected, because in this case what we don't want to do as well is make the opening too big and push the road too much higher up in a sense. So that's another challenge that we have. So that kind of leads towards those potentially open bottom options. Now if you have a
That would be
concrete,
this one here.
It could be like a concrete way, or it could be the very last pictures. Those are kind of two options. And then we can do a cost analysis, and based on the cost analysis, if we say, okay, projecting this kind of cost, we're they're both at the same, or maybe one is more. As far as life cycle goes, when we're going to the concrete, we're going to be at 75 years to 100 years. And when we're going to the steel, we're also going to be in the 75 years to 100 years. Life, when I talk about.
Well, the concrete there lasted a long time.
Yeah,
1900.
that's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Very interesting.
I mean. I'm thinking, well, like, why don't we just start going after the two that we, like, we know we're not gonna get the concrete bottom one, and let's just start seeing which one the ministry's gonna go with, or Madawaska Conservation gonna go with, right? Kind of feel it's gonna be the steel deck one.
Yeah.
So
Definitely those.
why don't we get the pricing on that and the concrete open bottom, and then compare the two and move on from there.
I think that's reasonable. And then the geotechnical report also is gonna be coming back to us. So if I add one, I guess, comment on the concrete whole structure, is that it's got a little bit of additional weight.
Right.
So the discussion with the geotech is gonna be, okay, if we consider that additional weight, is there concern? And I'm trying to say that I think we're gonna go towards that answer. Okay, that it's very likely gonna say, well, this is how much additional weight you're putting on your footings, which are sitting on blasted rock, which is sitting on soft soils. So essentially, in the event that the recommendation kind of leads or points towards the very last solution, I think that it's gonna be based on a cost and B, potentially also the additional weight.
Because the open concrete, we're gonna be working in the water, right?
You could actually be making a span that's like further outside.
So we can get outside of the water with the open concrete.
That's right.
Just have to take more of the road, right?
So they could have a very similar type of opening cross section. But the steel deck, I think we all know, is not as heavy as the concrete.
Right, yeah, no, I think the steel deck's the way to go, but
And we were looking for this operating year?
Yeah. because again, it's been left for so long that we can't move it anymore, but yeah.
From those photos, like, it looks like you could be liable to as soon as you get to.
I'll circulate a picture if you want to just have a look. This is the typical shape of the concrete portion precast that would be dropped in place.
For the
sitting on.
steel
Yeah.
wire.
And ultimately, you got a structure that kind of sits on the inside, which would be very likely like a 19 system.
I can do this in-house.
And then our fire department.
How many backhoe we have?
Our hose not big enough.
And then, is that a chip seal deck on top of that, or?
Yeah, so the deck at the end, there's different ways to do it. We can possibly pave it. The existing one that's concrete is, it's actually the original concrete. So the surface cement laid and stopped, and then it's the original concrete, and then it's off. But in this case, you have to do a treatment, and I would assume that it would be pavement.
Just another question if I could, so, well, I am leaning towards replacement, don't get me wrong, but I'm gonna ask the question because I think it's prudent. I believe I heard you say earlier that the existing bridge is structurally sound and not unsafe at this point.
Correct. We don't have any comments or anything to close it. What happens on the OSIM inspection is that we look at it every 2 years, and we try to see like how fast is the next deterioration compared to the previous year. So in this case, what's been red flagged is kind of similar to what was there before. And one of the comment with the barrel itself is that it's in good condition. So when we look at that structure itself, the concerns are the barriers and the fact that it's a single lane as well.
Right.
Were you
I
thinking
can-
like me puttying that?
Well, not necessarily just, I mean, visually, that might look nicer underneath for sure. But I mean, I see the open rebar and I
It's not
see,
anymore.
Yeah.
well, even if it's there, so I guess the question would be. I mean, if it's structurally sound and you've seen the deterioration every 2 years you do it, and it's been stable as this for at least since the last report.
If we were to look at the picture from the inside, we probably would notice that there's a bit more concrete that's falling off over time,
Right.
you know? So it would be a constant, slow deterioration over time.
And they're not good, they're good until they're not good.
Until the cars
Yeah.
on the opposite side of it. And
But is it possible, I think what the
Yeah.
question you're getting
Right.
at is it
We buy a
possible
year.
To stretch it out.
Yeah.
and then just replace the
The top,
top?
Yeah, as an alternative, I mean,
Changing the deck.
it's, I can never say that it's not an option, like you could do kind of a rehabilitation study. I think the OSIM report talks to that a little bit, where it says, like, we could do a full-blown rehabilitation study. And I don't know if there's about a $20,000 figure that was associated to that.
That's part of the difference between the 400 and the 444 that we're doing.
Right,
Engineering
so,
studies.
so if we did that, like a full rehabilitation study in a sense, it would probably warrant to spend like some monies, like, you know, say like an $80,000, I'm gonna throw a number, on the barriers to replace them, we make them safer and all that. Once it's done, then the barriers are kind of meeting the standard of today. But the fact is that, you know, the single lane is always gonna remain single lane. And
and you still got a bridge that's from 1900s.
that's right. So under the OSIM, they did identify it in the report as a recommendation to do like major or minor capital works. They identified as 2025. So it's simply identifying that, you know, it is one of the next structures that's more critical.
And I think they've been doing that for at least the last 6 years.
Yes.
Yes. This has been always, it's always been that it needs work. This is the bridge, it needs work. It's the priority bridge.
Yeah, and again, I'll come back to, it's not that I necessarily need to be convinced that it needs a new bridge, I just think it's worth having a fulsome conversation about it, where. You know, if we were to spend, I'm not a fan of spending a ton of money on doing a full study to see if we can rehab it, that just seems like. Throwing good money after bad, but. If we could look at a temporary to fix that top railing, to at least put it into, you're saying that's about an $80,000.
So
Cost.
if we spent like the $80,000, it would be like putting like all barricades to meet today's code.
Sure.
However, the day that a reconstruction comes, those are not necessarily gonna be reusable.
No, I appreciate that for sure.
So that's, now, there's also, you know, do we spend like, you know, 10-15,000 to keep just parging and doing something like that? That's an alternative, but the, we know for a fact that it would not meet like today's code. Like,
Right.
the little parging would not meet code, the 80-some thousand say would put new barricades that would meet code, but could not necessarily be reused on the next structure.
So if you went that way, like you were saying, right? Did
Yeah.
Rehabilitation, what do you think the timeline is, like lifespan of the bridge there?
To get
If we
next 5
just
years.
patch it,
Oh,
Years.
Well,
that's a
not
tough
2
question.
months. Yeah, how many years does 80,000 buy you?
Right,
Well,
that's honestly the question,
Right.
right, yeah. Because I mean, we're obviously looking at significant infrastructure deficits, not only this bridge, but others that, you know, we have significant pressure, so.
Yeah.
Just wanting to make sure that we're doing right on behalf of the taxpayer by, you know, strategically planning appropriately, so having all of that information. To make a wholesome decision, I think is important, so.
So what's the cost gonna be to, you know, to have you make that comparison?
Right, and that's what I'm saying, I'm not in, like, I don't wanna spend a whack of money on a study to tell us that it's not gonna, but. You know, if you told us without a study and we did the railings for 80 grand, you'd likely get out with the existing structure. another 5 years. Whether, and we can determine whether that's value or not, for sure. And
Yeah,
that's
It's just an
gotta be
option
council.
that we're looking
Yeah,
at.
Right, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we've done it before where we do the load rating evaluation. So we come in, we do a detailed measurement of everything else. We then evaluate, like, what's the deck fully, like, is the concrete sound, all of these, and then they come up with a calculation of, what's the weight capacity on it. Now, one thing, if I backtrack a little bit, is that what's important to do, and I think that's what we're talking about, it's the risk analysis. So one of the thing that triggers, I think, for this structure, a bit of a higher risk analysis in a sense, and I'll just go back to Highway 17, only because if there's an accident on 17 and you get like lots of bigger transport trucks and there's a detour for whatever reason, that's when potentially the risk could get increased. Because if there was to be an accident at that, and then it would be, we had opportunity to reconstruct, but then we invested barriers only, and the truck ran into and then we had this secondary collision kind of thing.
What is the load rating on that bridge now? Is it a 10-ton or is it posted?
That it's posted.
No,
that
it's not
means it's
posted.
not rated.
So we don't, yeah, so it's not even rated.
Officially, no.
And there's no guardrail that would be reusable. There's no fix that, so we can't do this in steps. That's not an option.
Right.
It's kind of all our,
Oh, nothing.
Yeah.
we'd be looking at spending, I don't know, 20%, I didn't, I'm not great math, but
Yeah.
20% of the bridge replacement cost to
Yeah.
buy a few more years, and I guess. I mean,
And
I
then-
know I keep pressing on, like, do you think that's a 5 year, do you think that's?
So- And it's a tricky question, and I know, like, my head's trying to do some analysis there as well I'm talking. So I'm thinking, okay, this is probably what we call a TL1 barrier as well. So what it means is that, when traffic comes in and hit it, they can't. You gotta keep traffic not in the water, but on the road.
Ideally.
So, one of the little challenge is that I'm just trying to think, okay, so let's say we came up with a strategy to install those guide rails. Then the thing is like, okay, how do we mount them? So I'm starting to think, okay, the only way to mount them is to drill on the deck and then to use like a Hilti glue to make sure that I can glue
So that
everything
weakening the deck by doing that.
to and it's gonna get some sort of rating. So potentially the answer to that question, if I go back and have some further discussions, is that given the thickness of the deck, condition of the deck, the drilling of the concrete that's fairly old, and using that kind of Hilti glue with the overall, might say that the barrier may not meet that TL1 that we're trying to achieve. I'm not sure if that's the answer, but I'm thinking that I might come back with that.
And it's not gonna get cheaper to do down the road.
Absolutely.
5 years down the
Yeah.
road, that 400,000 is probably gonna be 800,000.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, what I'm looking for is if it is not feasible to do that, take it off the table for us, so then we
Yeah.
can say to our taxpayers, we explored and it's not possible. If we explored and it is possible, then we're gonna build a case to whatever decision council will make about this. We just need to be able to stand
Yeah.
behind and say, this is an investment. It's a big chunk of change for our taxpayers, right? So I wanna make sure that we are able to tell the story about, yes, it is great that it's going from 1 to 2 lanes. It's been 1 lane forever,
Yeah.
so whether that happens now or in 4 years from now, I don't think our community will be up in arms either way, but
Yeah.
sure, that is a bonus for sure, that it's gonna go to a full 2 lane. Pretty sure I've driven Trunk Road 1,000,000 times and I've never noticed it as 1 lane. I think we've always used it as 2, I just probably it's not officially a 2, but
Or
Yeah.
you couldn't pass 2 cars side by side.
geez, I'm trying to even think like
You can't pass 2 cars side by side.
really, eh?
The plow just kills it. With no way down.
and I think we have to look at it from liability and risk perspective.
Oh, absolutely, for
Like,
sure.
that's number one.
It's not just even that, it's, the next bridge that's down is the one that's on Maple. And it needs a great deal of work as well, so
Yeah.
if we put this one off much longer, then we're putting all the other ones off, and if we just remediate them all. We're no
And then-
further ahead at the end of
Right,
the
and I think
day.
the past
because
practice-
There's so
Yeah.
I appreciate that argument for sure.
The past practices have been around here to let everything, to let it fail, then we fix it.
Yeah.
We're trying to,
And again, I'm not advocating,
No, no,
yeah,
no, no,
you're not
we're-
having to convince me.
no, we're exploring
Yeah,
all
yeah.
options, but
For sure, because I think that's a fair point, like, I mean, the infrastructure deficit we're facing is daunting and.
Yeah.
It just gets worse year over year when we don't put the money where we need to, right? So,
Well, if we spent $80,000 or $100,000. Just making it good enough, that's all it's going to be, is
absolutely.
good enough.
I agree
If-
with that.
And that's $100,000 out of our $444,000 is going to put a double lane bridge there that's going to be long outlast all of us.
That's true.
That- That's what I'm thinking, then we would have something, one really good thing that we fixed.
And part of development.
Yeah.
Solid part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't disagree with you by any means, like I just,
It's still, it is a good exercise to go through, and
Yeah.
like, this is, yes, we did look at it, but
correct,
here is the
rationale.
rationale, yes.
Yeah. I can add to that when I present the other options.
Yeah.
And then just, say, okay, we looked into it a little further and then I might repeat what I just said, but at
Right,
least
yeah.
I'll have a chance to.
Yeah, for sure, and it'd be helpful to say,
Yeah.
looked into it, and from your engineering standpoint, there is no saving this top. Rail in a safe
That's right.
way, great, or if there is, it would be 80 grand or 100 grand, and then we can just say, well, that's. If that's
Yeah.
a quarter of the price or 30% of the price, why would we do that, right? So,
Yeah.
I just wanna be transparent with the public, so,
That's good.
okay.
Good to go and get all of that looked after, finish on the next ones, and do you need anything from us when you go to speak to the approvals? 'Cause we can-
No, I think working with Alex there, we'll be able to do a few things. They're probably gonna ask for a site visit, and then with this, like, it's kind of a work plan, really. We know exactly the steps. There was a pre-consultation that was initiated already. So the Conservation Authority is actually kind of putting all these people together. And they'll let us know when are we ready to meet, which I'm hoping within a week or so, 2 weeks max, I would say, then we can meet. And then the discussion and because ultimately it's part of the environmental assessment process.
Are there any studies that we have to do now, or that we will have to do regardless of what option we go with, that we need to be mindful of for the timing?
So the FRI for species at risk that we talked about, and actually we already kind of engaged
Okay,
them to start. The geotech, the report's done, it's finished. Well, the report will be there in a month or so. But the field work's finished. The survey work is complete. The heritage desktop level 1 evaluation, I think, would be wise to do. And those are the ones, essentially.
And then we would want a breakdown of all of the costs so that we want the total amount for the entire project.
Yes.
So,
all the costs on what?
on the bridge project.
Yeah, but which,
the studies and the
Studies,
construction.
yeah,
And the
bridge.
different that
yeah,
options.
but we're not making it like a breakdown on all these.
No, I mean what we decide on, so
Right.
that when we, they're gonna give us some comparators, obviously, because we're gonna have to choose, right? But in the end, I think we need to justify everything that we've done and show what we got for our money, right? That's all I'm saying.
And I will make one more point if I could, Chair. I would just say that it's interesting in having gone through planning and engaging the Conservation Authority to hear that they are now starting to potentially not allow closed bottom structures. I would encourage the Conservation Authority locally and provincially to find some consistency and apply it consistent across. So if it's not going to be allowed in situations such as this, let's make sure that it's not allowed for our project and that it's not going to be allowed for the next project that gets applied for. Take it off the table. So that we don't actually have to, you don't even have to have a conversation with future councils about that as an option, if it's not even an option, but. This is more for the, I'm talking to you, but it's
Yeah.
not about you or
I
the
think-
support, it's. About.
Yeah. And then just to clarify, perhaps like on their behalf, is that I think their main concern is that with global warming, climate change and so forth. I think it's the fact that if a structure has a certain size and certain shape in opening, that they want to make sure that the new one is not any smaller in a sense.
Sure.
It's something that I think I've seen a lot in the past years, like over the course of the last decades, that structures that have, you know, closed bottoms, we're allowed to go with closed bottoms. How did that come about? I'm not sure. But the ones that are open bottom to go retroactive, never been able to.
So, and that's totally fair, like, if that's the
that's the rule,
standard, that's the
yeah.
standard, if you
Yeah.
have one, you can replace it with, if you can't, you can't.
Right.
It's the wishy-washy, like you win the lottery because you're dealing with somebody who's like, doesn't care quite as much.
Yeah.
And approves versus you go down to the next conservation authority and you don't know what you're gonna get,
No,
or
I-
somebody quits and then.
And it's a revolving door there all the
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, let's just.
What I was gonna say, it's who's in charge and like.
Yeah, and that's not okay, like
Yeah.
they need to base this by working with engineers to come up with a standard and ensure that it is just applied equitably with. But they are in charge, make the rule.
Yeah.
But make it an actual rule and apply it, so
I understand that for sure.
make your
We'll
life easier,
we'll bring that discussion to, like, yeah, in a sense, you know, when
Yeah,
the
yeah.
conclusion will be.
you can pretty it up a little. like-
Absolutely.
Don't you do that for me?
Yeah, I try.
So this is a structure, are these poured or are they structures that you're bringing in?
In that picture, they're all precast pieces.
Oh, they're all
Yeah,
precast.
yeah, we could have poured them like in these pictures, but those are precast, they come in and they assemble them precast.
No statement.
We've lost the knowledge of on site in some cases.
This is a very good report.
I like this one here,
Yes.
probably 800,000, this one.
No,
yeah.
that'll be the 400,000.
Yeah,
But-
I like that
Or
one.
a change, yeah.
The one on the picture is
Yeah.
is a very long.
Long one, yeah.
The one that you're having is
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
not as long. That's right. And if interested, I can provide you and Nikki with the location of one or two options of, you know, within, because there are some of those built around that, like without driving more than 20 minutes, half an hour, you know, easily see some.
Your pictures. I could stand at the bank and look at this.
Yeah.
Like your picture's great. Yeah,
You just got it.
right, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Ken.
Perfect. I'll leave this there and then we'll follow up relatively soon. Perfect.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Emma.
Emma.
Have a good night.
Take it as our.
Yeah, it's a signing
You can
bonus,
take
you're
it
welcome.
together,
Yeah.
No, it's too nice.
Yeah.
It's got, it looks like it's made out of oak.
Even more.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Yeah,
Good night.
so moved by Donna, second by Steve, that the corporate service committee meeting receives the information and estimate from Antoine Boucher, municipal engineer for trunk road replacement, and further that the committee recommends that the trunk road bridge be considered for replacement in 2025. The municipal budget delegations, all in favor? Carried. Public Works. All you.
So as previously provided by Pension, a report was distributed regarding the findings of a mold investigation at the Public Works shop. Concerns were brought forward when an odor in the office and lunchroom were present and visible water damage was seen in the walls, roof and floor of the bathroom, lunchroom, furnace room and the upstairs parts room. So after conducting an in-house investigation regarding a water leak, it was stated by multiple employees that approximately 4 years ago, there was a water line that blew in the shop. This was a result of an employee leaving the garage door open overnight, causing the furnace to run continuously until the propane was empty, therefore resulting in a frozen water line that ended up bursting. The problem was never properly remediated and the saturated sections of drywall were cut out and replaced. These replacement pieces of drywall are now discolored and soft to the touch. Following Pynchon's investigation, they have found that there is black mold within the walls of the shop. This issue is directly related to poor ventilation, little to no vapor barrier / insulation, as well as moisture. A local contractor was also contacted in relation to the roof installation and stated if we are seeing frozen spots in extremely cold conditions, as well as sweating from the roof, that the insulation that's pressed between the two panels might be a cause of this issue as well. Also, the exhaust fan located on the back wall of the shop continuously allows water into the shop, which drips down the wall and pools on the floor. Our CBO was actually in and took a look at the shop, found a few issues that we mitigated for the meantime, but he kind of came up with quite a list of other things we can look into for future, or other professionals that we should call and assess some of the damage or what's going on with our piping and ventilation stuff. So moving forward, with the findings of mold within the shop being serious, it's apparent that we need to move forward to remediate these problems. It's also believed that professionals in the field of plumbing, HVAC, building design, and architecture should be contacted to provide further information on what is required to fix the root problem. Other remedies have been discussed, such as repairing the current issues at hand, rebuilding the existing office, lunchroom, and bathroom, as well as the possibility of an addition of a building with some new office space, turning the existing space into a parts and storage room, as well as a staff locker room. Staff are currently moving forward with an investigation and reaching out for quotes on the required remediation agreement. First step is the removal of the damaged walls and materials to determine the extent of the remedial work required. This must be done by a third party. Staff have been working with DKI Contracting. During the stage, staff cannot work in the office or lunchroom and will have to relocate. Second stage would be to rebuild and repair the existing infrastructure. And staff will work on getting quotes for this work to be completed and then decide the best option to proceed with the final remediation and report back to council for consideration.
Moved by Mary, second by Steve. That the committee accept, that's what I'm reading.
Yeah.
The picture one, yeah. Committee accepts a pension investigation of mold growth and further recommends to council to move forward with DKI construction contracting to remove the mold damage at the public works shop. And further that the recommendations of the chief building official be completed and staff continue to obtain quotes to remediate the damage. All in favor?
No, wait,
No,
question.
we're gonna discuss
Wait,
that.
question preference.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So was there an incident report for what happened then? So I'm just looking for paperwork and maybe a timeline, and can you tell us the story of what happened?
I personally wasn't there, so I
No, I
can't tell you
know.
any of that. Nor is there a report or anything that I can find that recurs to this issue. So like I said, I just spoke with staff that have been here for way longer than I have, and they've given me their 2 cents on the situation.
Okay, so what we know then is that somebody left the door open overnight
At -40.
at -40, and then pipes burst, and then
$600 in propane.
right, so then when whoever staff came in the next day, this was a problem, so then were there tests? So I'm thinking if this was my house and I'm seeing water damage or whatever, I would have to pull the drywall out. So do you know who replaced the drywall at least, or who did the fix?
It was guessing it was done in-house.
In-house? So we have no invoices to say that they brought someone in to
No,
have a
there
look,
was all
or?
that second.
And we weren't here, but.
No, I
this is
know.
all in the conversations that we've had with the staff that were there. So there may be paperwork, but we have not found it. we've not found anything
This was,
to highlight this.
yeah,
part.
this was just staff being negligent on the building and the facility. And
Well,
when it happened, then they're just trying to remediate it and clean it up and do the best they can to cover it up.
Well, kind of hide the fact that someone left the door open all night long in the winter time.
The CBO, like when he came out too, you'll see on the back wall of the shop, so in the back corners are furnace, like pump room for the in-floor heating. And the water lines kind of run out there down the back side of the shop, all the way across to like the mechanics bay at the far end, right? So all the other pipes are copper, and the top line that burst is just shark bit on with plastic piping the whole way back to the other.
So like jerry rigged.
Essentially,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it works, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's the proper thing.
Okay.
I mean, it's just disappointing because this is gonna cost us tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix over. You know,
Well, like I said, we're initially in the office and could smell an odor when the heat came on.
Well, it's now a
And
health and safety
and
issue
we-
and
we
we
did
have to remediate.
Cut a couple holes in the drywall. And then DKI came in and took a look and he said, don't pull anything more off, like there's black mold.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't think anybody is disappointed with the people that are there currently.
no,
But this is yet another problem that we're inheriting.
Yeah.
And if Dan, we're at 100 grand, it's.
I think we're getting off easy at
yeah,
100.
you know, and remediation work is always expensive when you talk about black mold. I mean,
Yeah, so I would agree. It's super frustrating, but at this point, our job is gonna be to ensure a safe work environment for our staff. To just move this forward and have it resolved. What choice do we have?
we don't have any choice.
What choice do we have?
No.
So,
Insurance is off the table, I'm guessing, because of like,
So we did send the pension report along with a bit of a story, like the reports to our insurance company. And they said that if it is the garage door, if there's an incident like that, then that would not be covered. If it comes back after we have all the investigations, then it's the roof membrane that did it, then potentially, but even that would be a stretch, but there is potential there. But we don't know that that's the roof.
And that's the other issue.
Right.
is when I spoke to the contractor that previously worked on the public works building years ago. He said being a Butler building, what they do is they'll squash together the two pieces of sheet metal in the roof with some insulation foam on the inside. Over time, that deteriorates. So if it's -30 out and like we're in the shop, you can see there's pockets on the roof that are frozen, right? So he was saying that's where your moisture is trapped between the two layers. And essentially that creates condensation. right?
And once that insulation gets wet once, it's useless.
Yeah.
Do we know how old the building is?
It was built in 2004.
2004?
Really?
So the other thing that we haven't
Wow.
been able to do due to the snow is do a full roof inspection, like get somebody in to inspect the roof, because there are some spots down the I-beams that water is leaking. We just can't determine if it's coming from outside or if it's sweating from
Condensation from inside.
condensation from inside.
well, I mean, the conversation will inevitably be whether or not it's prohibitive to repair. Or like, I mean, we're gonna look and say, we're gonna put 3/4 of the cost of a new building into a 20-year-old building. Or are we building a new building, which would be, again, just terrible news.
Yeah.
So, but again, I mean, if we're 3/4 of the cost of a new building, putting that into a 20-year-old building. Again, it's a conversation the council's gonna have to have about what's the best value on behalf of the taxpayers. Today, do we make a bigger investment today for the longer term savings on behalf of the township?
might not even be a longer term.
Yeah.
We're blowing through buildings every 20 years.
Right,
Like,
so,
I'm shocked that that building's only 20 years old.
yeah. I guess, yeah, I look forward to the full report, because I think you're right, you have to bring in other experts to make sure that we're getting full analysis.
Currently, I'm sure everybody's read the pitching report, right? Like one of their biggest concerns was dust cover, dust cover, dust cover. But then when we go back to our ventilation system, right? So Mike found that one of the units was plugged upstairs, right? But it's also leaking water out through a return line that was never properly fastened on. It's just minuscule PVC pipe that's
Yeah.
running around, right? With no drip tray underneath or no anything, right? So I mean, that's why I think a serious plumber as well as an HVAC expert should probably come in.
And the
Like
roofing person.
myself and Nikki were saying, the only issue is when you rip open the walls, we're kind of,
Oh, we're committed,
yeah.
we're
Yeah.
committed at that point.
Oh,
Well,
there's
but I
no-
think we're committed now.
but in
because
order
there's black
to,
mold.
in order to ensure a safe work environment, at some point. We're gonna have to, I mean, I think we, if I read correctly, we need to re-home the 2 full-time staff that are in there, the public works manager and the
Yeah,
assistant.
Yeah,
That are basically sitting in the office all the time. Whether or not it's safe for our staff to come in to just get into a truck and pull out. You know, that's one thing, and we can hopefully get by until the nicer weather to get a further investigation
Well,
and.
like Nikki and I discussed too, I personally, like, just from past dealings with stuff like this, I think what they'll do is section off part of the shop, right? And hook up their own ventilation and all that stuff to do
Right.
the remediation, right? But once again, it's gonna have to go outside of in-house because
Absolutely,
nobody's
absolutely.
properly trained
no,
in
no,
No,
no.
environmental
no.
restoration, right? So,
So there's drywall with the black mold
yeah,
in the insulation.
it's black.
And is there a cement wall there as well?
No, so that's the funny thing. The outside of the building is sheet metal, right? So they said in some spots when they did their test holes, pinch and drilled through the wall and just kind of took a sample. They pulled out black mold throughout the insulation that they could find, but in other sections, like the front wall that faces like the parking lot, there was no insulation in that wall. So it was just drywall over top of frames and
Studs, yeah.
studs, yeah.
So then they would have to seal that with some kind of special sealant with.
So another option that was discussed was spray foam, but the problem, as the CBO explained to me, that we can spray foam all we want, but then you still have to coat your spray foam to be up to
Yeah.
code, which is an additional cost. I know spray foam's not cheap either.
Like if we reframed it all on the inside and had a slightly smaller shop by whatever the 4 inches or whatever.
Mhm.
And spray foamed it all and then just re-drywalled it. It's a massive cost, but you're gonna save it over propane and crap over the years if there's one entire wall of the shop that's not insulated, like.
Well,
We're losing.
But that's the issue is like, I can't speculate on what has drywall and what doesn't, because I've only cut open a 2x2
Well,
hole, right, on one wall, one exterior wall, but there's all the other walls as well as the bathroom and the furnace room that butt up to each other, but there was a leak above as well, right? That's where the
now,
water.
these are all 2x4 walls,
Yeah.
2x6 or whatever, but yeah, it's gonna be a total gut job.
I was gonna say,
Cause that
like,
wood
is
will be
there,
have black mold
yeah,
all over it.
is there any part of the shop that we can save or do?
The,
because-
no, like the actual shop where the
Steel.
operators and the staff and
Yes.
that sort of thing, that's just steel. Like,
Okay, and we know, and we think that that's fine.
yeah,
So
For
it's
the-
this
for the
one
most part.
side, it's the one side.
it's
where
the side with the
bathroom is.
drywall
Okay.
and the office, the bathroom
And-
and the lunchroom
Okay.
that would
Like,
mold.
have we looked into, was this stuff built in-house, or is there a building permit for the bathroom and the office and all that stuff?
No, yeah, I can't.
No, I'm just
Yeah,
something to
I-
look into,
Yeah.
to see,
No.
cause it doesn't sound like this was built by a professional.
No, I was gonna suggest maybe going back and looking through invoices, were there invoices for like huge amounts of drywall or?
Well, I do like the idea of looking to see if there's a permit
Yeah.
and then an
Building.
occupancy permit, because then it would have had to pass code back then.
I just know from the CBO attending the shop last week, what his findings were. There's a lot more problems than what I could speak to
Yeah.
because I'm not an expert like he is and that sort of thing,
Right.
right? So he
Sure.
pointed out quite a few things that I, would have looked right over.
But I think that Dan's point is if it wasn't built to code, somebody else besides the township might actually be liable.
If we actually paid for, although if
Yeah.
we signed off on. Yeah, if our building inspector signed off and gave occupancy after it was done, then, you know.
We don't know how that.
No, it's just something to look into,
Yeah.
see
No,
if it
no,
was
for
done
sure.
in-house or a hodgepodge thing, or an actual professional did it.
So is it fair to say that today, what we need to, obviously, you're just advising us that you need to relocate the 2 office staff? And that you're gonna find another municipal building to go operate out of, I assume you're gonna work with the CIO and picking an office space. But I think that's important to ensure safety for our staff. And then really, this is an FYI, because we're waiting on a more detailed analysis, because you're gonna bring in some professional, bring in the plumber, bring in roofing person, bring in like anybody can do the analysis of like truly, what are we looking at? Is it a full gut job? Is it a rehab job? Is it a?
So what is DKI propose, like, are we proposing them to start carrying all the?
Yeah, I mean, we've been in contact with DK. They're the ones that initially referred pension to us for the mold investigation. But yeah, I think at this point, it's probably best to let them figure out what's going on.
100%, I think you have to rip everything back to the steel walls to see what we're dealing with.
And at least get the mold out of there ASAP, right? So the other thing then is that, do we go ahead and put back what was there? Or is this an opportunity for us to, if we need extra room to look at that? So if it's gonna cost us an extra 20,000 because we've got everything open to do something else, like, do we do that, right?
A better design.
A better
style.
design or more space or, look at our needs, more storage, whatever.
Yeah, I just don't, like, I can't answer that until.
No, I
they
know.
let me know
So,
what's
so I'm
behind
just,
the walls, right?
looking at two options. One is as is and one is, if we can get better for a bit more because we're already doing all of this stuff, why wouldn't we do
'Cause
that?
we're going,
right?
we're gonna start from scratch essentially,
Exactly,
so.
exactly.
you know.
So,
And I think that's one of the reasons we considered if we're gonna spend over $100,000, we don't know where we are
Yeah,
yet, but
yeah.
when we started getting some of the idea that this is gonna be well over $100,000, it's like, is it better to just walk away from the office, the lunchroom being in the inside
mhm,
and just put an addition on the outside somewhere?
mhm.
So that's where the offices would be, and that would probably be the same money, but would give us value added.
Mhm.
So we started looking at what that
Yeah.
looks like as well, so definitely lots of options to
You still
consider.
you'll still have to strip everything back.
Yeah.
even if you're
Yes.
building.
So we talked about this quite a while ago, and I'm guessing we just never advanced on anything because we're waiting for this report.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
I mean, it's just disappointing. I mean, the money we're gonna spend in this, I mean, not like we have it.
No. This could have been part of our bridge.
A big part of it.
Well, we can't leave our stuff in there. and-
Oh, no,
Yeah.
that goes without saying.
No, no choice.
Right. So,
I think you can do all in
So
favor
we're
now.
okay with the,
all in favor of this motion? Carried. Yeesh. Moved by Neri, second by Donna, that the Corporate Service Committee recommends the council to consider the following priorities for infrastructure improvements in the 2025 budget.
so there's a report in here, obviously Trunk Road, we've already had that discussion about it. The report in here is about the development road, so we did not get the funding. And that we had desperately needed in order to move forward with the full rehabilitation of Development Road. So now, for 2025, the ideal would have been to prepare Development Road for the funding project. We also discussed applying gravel to one road or several small roads and replacing Trunk Road Bridge. Those were the three options that we've discussed to date. We can't accomplish all three on our budget. The bridge does need to be replaced and should be a priority. That leaves capital works for the roads, and we're looking to council for direction, so we can obtain quotes for what you would like as a priority. I did email the updated numbers, because in here I put some numbers and then I'm constantly trying to rework what we can do to find some money. So in the capital budget last year, this much prettier. So Development Road, what we did do, just as a cost estimate from Blue Sea or from line 3 up to South Shore. In 2023, that was $525,000. Our revenue, I think I'm missing a piece of paper. Trunk Road, we know is around $400,000, what we just heard now. In our budget for gravel, we typically have about $165,000 that we can spend for gravel. So we have, I think it's close to, I didn't bring my the right paper with me, but.
Available funds operating for 2025, 515,270
Yes,
is what is down there.
Yeah.
The reserves are AMP and CFP and OCIF, so the bottom number
yeah,
is 966,445.
and our total, if we did all of those projects, there's still, you know, the 4 and the 5, we're over $1 million to do everything. And we
Yes.
can't deplete our reserves
no,
because,
yeah.
as you know, from the road need study and the bridge study, that there is a lot of infrastructure that,
Coming up, yeah.
well, there's a huge deficit already.
Right.
That we need to do, so I guess we're just really looking for. On Development Road, do we want to do 2 kilometers? Is that the best option, because we still have the mob and demob costs of getting the surface treatment and everything. But do we do 2 kilometers, do we do 4 kilometers?
So are you saying we only have 515,000 really? That's what we've got some in reserve, so.
Yeah.
What do we want to keep in reserves? Because that would give us a bottom line, like what is typically a good amount to stay in reserves. So that would give us a bottom line of how much we have, right?
And
Right?
I think what, like we were discussing before, we almost have to pick one thing instead of what we were trying to do the
Yeah.
last time we discussed this.
right, but here's the thing, I don't think the gravel run should be gravel run should be a consistent thing year after year. I don't think it should be part of like an option.
Okay,
I think that's just weird looking at drawing funds from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean,
Is the gravel program not in operating then? It's
it's
not-
in operating, last year
Yeah.
we had 145,000.
Okay,
50,000 of that got spent on the pulverizing for Development Road.
okay,
So the remainder got on the gravel program.
okay.
And that's what we use, so yes, and the 145,000 budget for gravel is in the operating budget, so
Okay.
yes, we can do it.
So
It's,
what's this 165 for the gravel? program?
that's the gravel.
But is
So,
that extra?
no,
No,
that's
it's
the,
part of
that's the money that
stockpile.
is in the operating, so if we have to pull money for the capital, then that would be a place that you could
Oh,
also
that's what
pull
you're.
the
Take a
money.
hit.
But I-
Yeah.
yeah, in my view, I don't think we should be like stealing the gravel money shouldn't be an option. The gravel money is the gravel money. Cause I mean, otherwise, we're always gonna just rob that money because there's always a bigger project.
I feel the same way. It's a program, right? It's a
Mhm.
program and it's something that is ongoing and every year, this is what you have to do. So.
I mean, if the gravel,
Yeah, we-
if it would have been done like for the last 12 years, I would have said, yeah, let's steal the money from there.
Right, but we're trying to make up
But
Yeah,
lost.
we're making up for lost time
Yeah.
and I
or we
like,
could reduce it and steal
Well,
some of the money,
I
but
think-
yeah.
I think too, another topic of discussion might be for development, if we just complete all our like brushing, ditching, dig outs.
Preps, all the preps.
I know that's not what the residents or the council would like to hear, but I mean, based upon everything else that's been going on.
it's not a bad idea because after we pulverize the development, the worst part of it,
Mhm.
I mean, there's been like next to no complaints. So I'm kind of in favor of, let's do the digs,
And
let's do
then
the ditching, the brushing, the digs.
realistically, the only additional cost would be our culverts, the staff's time, right, as well as extra calcium.
Well, we budget for the
fuel.
staff time already, right?
No, but I'm just,
Yeah.
If there's overtime. So,
There
sorry,
should be no overtime.
if there is, but, so I think, what this is saying is that it's a given that we're doing the trunk road bridge. So that's 400,000 off the table in ready to go to spend, right?
Mhm.
So that's a done deal.
So then I think, and then you can say that about the gravel.
And the gravel is,
I mean, that's
less
my
than anybody
yeah.
else,
So I agree, I would like to take nothing off the table, but what makes it hard to make a decision is. If we take nothing off the table and we're looking at a 12% tax increase, we're definitely gonna be revisiting the conversation to say, okay. Let's reprioritize. Now, if we're doing all this and not taking anything off the table and we're sitting at a reasonable tax increase. I think that council's comfortable with. It's easy to say, don't take anything off the
I don't have to
table.
be the voice of reason.
Well, I would like to see, I need more information, quite frankly, to be able to say, yes, what we're asking our taxpayers to pay next year, and a tax increase is reasonable, given all of the work that we have to do. We have a public works garage that needs fixing, You know, I too want the gravel program, like, that's what people are noticing about the work that we're doing in this municipality. And it's funny, because you say, we haven't had complaints about development road, in fact, I've received compliments about the development road after being pulverized, say, it is so much better now that it's gravel, because you can tell where the
Grade it
drain has
up.
been, you can see. So, you know, if we have to live with that and do the dig out work is great work that needs to happen anyways. I think that's great. And then if we can keep a gravel program, awesome. But we are all looking at some pretty substantial numbers that we don't know what that ends up looking like
Right.
in a percentage next year,
But,
right?
but here, we're back to, this is what previous councils have done.
No, yeah.
The numbers look scary, so let's not do anything.
See, and I would rather, let's look at what the numbers are, and if we need to pull, maybe it's not the gravel program that, like, we as council get to say, okay,
Sure.
what are the budget lines? And we look at and reprioritize and delay. It doesn't have to instantly be the gravel
Works
program.
manager salary.
Yeah.
No, but yeah.
Yeah,
It's like, it's just one of those, like, yeah, let's have that conversation.
So I
As a
forget the
whole.
number, I think Alex, what do you have, 200 and something for the digs?
224, 158.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
That
the, sorry,
was
that's
the last
the
report.
previous report.
Previous report.
So,
I mean, the only thing essentially I think that's might go up a bit is our culverts, price wise.
well, and they're going up,
I
there's no
mean,
stopping that.
Yeah,
But, like, to me, like, if we can prep the road,
Yeah,
the ditching, the brushing, and do the digs, put it back to gravel.
and let's be
And then do
completely honest,
fork-
before we do a surface treatment, that road probably will need a lift of gravel in certain sections.
Sure, I would think
So-
you put a 6-inch lift on the whole road before we do
But
a,
that's an,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what I'm planning for. In my numbers, that's what's planned for. the lift
is that in
on
the
road.
400,000? No,
The 525
okay, 526,
That's
yeah, that's
4
4
kilometers.
kilometers.
so if we did,
With the lift and the surface treatment.
Okay.
so if we did 2 kilometers, if we, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
In my head, if we can afford to do the 2 kilometers, don't, just put a gravel back on top. And then calcium, and then next year do another 2 kilometers, and then pave chip seal 4 kilometers. If we can afford it, or
Right.
Yeah,
whatever.
we need to see what they'll.
It's
But-
an option to look at.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, then you're gonna save on mobilization and demobilization, because you're doing bigger chunks at once.
right.
I mean, maybe you go 6 kilometers.
And I guess it all depends too on what quotes look like from the contractors for,
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing now is you're gonna see how the road's gonna react now that you have proper ditches, you have no berms. You're gonna see how the road reacts now and compared to the way it used to react.
right?
I don't know, like I said, it just hurts to see start hacking at the gravel program that we just started.
yeah, and I don't think that's the first thing
No.
we look to hack. I think we ask our CIO for other options so that we can then make an informed decision about. Maybe it's a little bit from a couple of different, maybe it's I don't know, I'm not gonna presuppose what that might look like, but. I do love the idea of doing the dig outs, the brushing, like all of that is utilizing the equipment and the training. The equipment that we've now purchased in-house and we have the ability to do, and the training we've provided our staff, that's just utilization of the assets that we have invested in on
And-
behalf of the township being utilized. And for very minimal cost impact, additional cost impact, we've already invested in the equipment, we've already invested in the training for our staff, we already have the staff ready to go.
Line 3 looks great,
Yeah.
development looks great with the brushing it way back. I mean, how many kilometers have you done?
Almost 11,
So, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
so
9.2, I think, for ditching and 11.7 for brushing.
That's great.
yeah, I mean, if you put that to a contractor number, like, that's huge.
Well,
Those
how
numbers are
many,
Huge,
how many years worth of ditching was that in previous before we had like, that's
100.
right. So I mean, we're already
Like,
light years ahead because of the investments, the strategic investments we've made.
And I know I will touch on it just because we're talking about it. I know there's concerns about the road and the ditch depth and that sort of thing. The road itself has not gotten any narrower. So the MTO spec for the road, like Antoine just touched on, is 6 meters edge to edge. That road in most spots is almost 8 meters wide. It's just the depth perception when you drive down the road with having no shoulders and you know, like the
And the,
ditch
and
there.
the grass is
Right, the
gone.
grass is cut, the brush is cut, so the road essentially looks smaller than it is.
But it's not.
Everyone
it's
likes
not.
the berms as a bit of a buffer to push it back
There-
into the road.
There's
It's a
over,
safety.
there's
Yeah.
over 7 meters of road width
Yeah.
all throughout line 3.
Hey, and I watched the car tonight, way up in the bank in line 3, but it had nothing to do with the road. It looks like they just drove off the road.
Right,
Slow down. It's a-
And I wanted to speak to that too, because there's obviously a lot of posts going on. The reason the ditches are so deep is because they haven't been done in forever. And they'll protect the longevity of the road in the spring when it washes out and things like that.
And I'm-
well, and it's
the
all
whole
got to
design
do
is to
with,
get the
yeah,
water
it's
off
got
the
to do with
road.
your drainage plan.
And
your water
unfortunately-
flow, and then as well as your snow load in the winter time, right?
Yeah.
If you don't see, like, I'm sure most people have seen it, but you go down line 3, there's not huge snowbanks on the side of the road.
Right.
To play
It's-
bumper cars in, it's the snow is in the ditch, so when that snow thaws, it goes down to the waterways, right, and flows where it's supposed to.
Water
go.
flows downhill, so that's why you have to have ditches start here and go deeper.
Yeah.
I'm all for, if anybody has an informed opinion that they would like to come in and have a conversation with council and express your concerns, have at it. The keyboard warriors that think that they're a smarter engineer or a public works manager than what we have, without truly not being knowledgeable, well, that's just noise to me. So I'm open to, please, if you have a legitimate concern, come on in, we're happy to
We have
hear
a
it.
question period.
And yeah, we have a question period, please utilize it. And it'll also give us an opportunity to explain exactly what we're talking about here for the
Yeah.
4 people that are watching at home.
Yeah.
But if those individuals would actually just please call the mayor. And But we would be more than happy to
Another
provide.
question to ask you there about the point of time. Had we got the grant, were we still thinking of doing the bridge?
Yes,
Okay,
if we had the grant, then this would be much easier to
Yeah.
manage.
for development.
And the unknown costs for the shop have nothing to do with this budget.
That was, yeah, that came out
Well,
of nowhere.
Yeah, but
That
where's
came out of
that,
nowhere.
where's that money gonna
That
come
wasn't
from?
planned.
Yeah.
And that's what we're saying.
Like, do we have to do less road stuff because we
Well,
won't have
that's the
this?
point I made when I came back in the room, was we only have 2 options. We take it from our existing budget or we tax a higher rate. So before we make any decisions, let's look at
Yeah.
what those are.
And I appreciate that you need to see the fuller budget, but we're trying to put the numbers together. To say, okay, so what are the scenarios? So
Right.
we needed this conversation so that we can determine as we're sitting down to look through those numbers and go, okay, get this vote, this vote, and this vote. So that we can give you that informed decision on what you guys.
Yeah, I think what we've heard tonight was there's priority in Development Road, some work happening. Sounds like it'll be in Hurdle. Obviously, the bridge is important. We got dropped on with the shop potentially. I don't know.
And
that
we have
there's any
no
ability
clue
to
of a
do that.
number.
And obviously the gravel program is important to not necessarily carve that out, but what does that look like? In the big-
Right.
The shop's kind of scary because again, like people have said already, it's such a niche market. Those remediators to come in and fix it and make it safe, honestly, kind of charge. I know whatever they want, because there's nobody else doing that stuff.
Environmental restoration is expensive.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah, it's cause they're, it's black mold, it's full respiration.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Special training, yeah. Okay, well,
Okay.
Were we helpful?
Well, you're putting all 3 of them down, because it's just for budget deliberations, right?
yeah,
I guess my other question, when we look at Development Road, because we didn't, and we don't know where this is going, but it's definitely something you have to think about. We didn't pulverize the 2 kilometers.
Right.
From line 3 to Chum. So are we starting development when we do start graveling, doing everything? Are we doing that from the east end? Or are we coming back to pulverize? Cause I have to put that in the budget. So do we start here or there?
I personally think we start at the east end, the people in that section were quite adamant to leave that chip seal, so. Start on the east end and
Okay.
work,
Start Mount Pleasant Lane.
yes, and work up. That's my thoughts.
What are you thinking? No,
To pulverize what area?
the section that wasn't pulverized, so from line 3 to
To
Trout
Trout
Pond, we
Pond.
left, right? So it's existing tar and chip, but Dan was just saying we start back down towards Mount Pleasant. If we do any new work and leave that section because the residents are adamant about leaving it, right?
We don't pulverize anymore right now, we
No.
just start
Until
working
we-
towards it.
Until,
we can do something.
We're ready.
until we
know
get
when
that
we're
very
ready.
last section, then
Yeah.
then we do whatever work we need to do, pulverize
Yeah.
it and chip seal it.
That's not unreasonable.
I think that's the way to go, but I mean, like I said. You guys can,
They were happy with it, so we'll leave it.
Oh, I just think
Okay.
if this year, like, we do the takeouts and that sort of thing, right? Like, our brushing, they're almost done one side of the road, all the way to Rutherglen line.
right,
There's some sections, through the S bends and the dips that were left alone due to traffic control issues, but they'll get done. So,
and I mean, coming back, even if you get past where you plan on doing the digging that you, I mean, you still have a month of winter left to keep
Yeah.
brushing, so you should get well past
Mhm.
where you need to be.
Can I ask, as well? It would be good for council deliberation and consideration, not that we would necessarily move forward, but what does a short-term loan look like in some of the capital? So what's our current interest rate? Where does that sit with our, financing abilities?
And our loan load.
Our loan cap.
Yeah.
Like, we're looking at some really big stuff that we
Sure.
might be like, we're better off to try and pay that over the next 4 years.
Mhm.
To be like, yeah, we'll take a loan for a 5-year term loan and we'll just obviously budget, because some of these are really big ticket items that are gonna be.
And are you saying for development?
Or any of them, like, it would be interesting to know, like, what would be a comfortable. Rate, like how high is council comfortable to go up to in a borrowing limit?
Yeah.
Maybe we're already there, maybe it'll be like, okay,
Yeah,
we don't.
we do
wanna
have
borrow.
room. We do
Yeah.
have room.
So what does that look like? Is the interest rate
Reasonable.
worth it and
Right.
reasonable at this point? Like, just to put it on the table for consideration for.
Just
council.
information.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we like, maybe that will become part of the bigger broader conversation, but
You know, and it's good information, but the only problem I see with that is if we're boring for this, how do we move forward?
100%, yeah. It's
Right.
almost like we are doing things in 5-year chunks, but like a bigger project in a 5-year chunk. Then borrow again in 5 years, like, a $500,000 project at $100,000 a year
Right,
for 5 years. And then in 5 years from now, if we have another $500,000 project or 5 $100,000 projects, maybe there's a rotating debt
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
If
It's
the
an
interest isn't
offset.
crazy. Isn't a bad
So we'll
investment.
bring
so.
it.
I know you're working on it too, and it probably is more for the next item, but we need to know how much we're saving doing our work in-house.
Mhm.
So we need some kind of a report, maybe a KPI, somebody can tell me a KPI, anybody.
Alex almost has the report done, and he would have had it was me that took it off the agenda today, but he does have his report done.
we spoke, we'd rather submit both of it at the same time.
All right,
Go over it
yeah,
rather
'cause I
than
think that is
compile
gonna be
everything into this
key,
meeting, it's
because
freaking.
I'm not sure anybody understands the short-term pain for long-term gain, right? That we are going to see over the coming years. It's the return on investment that we really need to communicate well.
Mhm.
yeah, like, I mean, just quick numbers, I mean, I don't know what hours are on the excavator, but if it's 700 hours on the excavator. At $150 an hour, it's $105,000 that they've saved, potentially not saved, but I mean.
There's
Yeah.
there's 540 at 150 an hour, you're essentially 81,900
Sounds like you have this in a report.
Yeah. That we've saved already this year, right?
Well,
Essentially, it's
Wait a
26%.
second, you pulled it off, yeah.
26% of your overall spending is already what we've knocked down, if you
Yeah,
put it in a
yeah.
perspective based upon the hours of operation.
Yeah, I mean, they're not little numbers, is my
No, I-
point, right? Like, they're not little numbers.
No, I think it's the story we need to tell,
Yeah.
like, our taxpayers have been very forgiving with us, waiting to see like, okay. We're a new council, they see some work happening. They see investments being made, but we just need to tell the story about why those investments are paying off, right? Like how that investment of the excavator and the equipment and the training,
Mhm.
like how much that is actually truly saving. We're about to talk
Yeah,
about a
we
sweeper.
yeah.
It's the same idea,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a really easy business case to make to say,
Mhm.
this is how much we were spending on a rent. This is how much a new one's gonna cost us. Then we can do the job at our pace, get it done properly, be satisfied with the work. Like, I'm not gonna jump to the next report, but like, it's a very easy, I know, but yeah. It's just, it's a very easy business case. We are running this township like a business.
Right.
Mhm.
And I don't know that that has happened in quite some time. So the fact that we're running like a business, our taxpayers deserve to understand the
Yeah.
benefits, the cost benefit analysis, right?
Ice
So.
cream surfacer. Did we settle it?
I know in your report with the bridge, you know, you're talking about trying to save some cost by doing some in-house work, but. I mean, to me,
I
I
know
think
we-
you're overload, like,
We discussed before and too, I mean,
you can only do so
we're
much.
currently down staff too, so
Right.
it doesn't really help with the
No, no,
the
I-
operation side of things.
I mean, to me, as I would rather see you just focus on development road and,
Yeah, the
Let's-
programs.
yeah,
Yeah.
the gravel
Brushing
programs,
yeah,
brushing,
program,
and
ditching.
if we do the bridge, we just, they get the whole project.
What could you do for the bridge anyway?
You
The
dig
excavation.
Dig the
Oh,
abutment and stuff.
right, we
Dig
got
out
the
that and then
digger,
get somebody
right,
to come in to pour.
We bring the digger in and dig it.
right, right, okay.
We talked about for the gravel program, if we just dumped it from our dump trucks to, but we're like belly dump is much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
You and we
We are
Don't
looking
say
at
that, Alex
all
will bring a
the
report for
other-
belly next week.
like we are gravel program.
I'm sick next week, actually.
Yeah, perfect, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, we gotta learn to work smart too,
Mhm.
right? So working smart doesn't always look cheap,
Mhm.
so.
no, and I mean. You know, as far as picking roads for the gravel program, I mean, I think we've done some big stretches. I think we should hit this, like a lot of the
Smaller.
smaller roads.
Smaller side streets that, you know. It's got rocks protruding that the grader keeps hitting. or
Right.
Complaints of water.
And I mean,
that's
can
what
we,
they- so-
you know, can we go ahead and pop a few of those rocks out, or are they bedrock?
And that's,
Well, 9 times out of 10, you think they're bedrock, but they just pop out.
or like at the corner of line 3 and Trunk Road, we initially thought it was bedrock and. It ended, or sorry, thought it was just a stone and it ended up being bedrock.
Bedrock,
the
sure.
whole road, right?
I mean, you
So-
don't know until you
which-
poke around
Which
on
needs
it.
blasted, right?
Yeah,
It's one of
yeah.
those.
We don't get to do
we
that.
do that.
We don't have any. like-
No, we're just gonna lift it with more gravel and bury it. bedrock. Jesus.
And we request a social media post explaining the ditching in the roads in the winter and how to drive safe in the winter. Something
Yeah.
To that effect.
I think there's been
Since that's the
multiple
hot
posts
topic.
that touched on that, but I'm sure we can stick on
And,
with.
you know,
Yeah.
drive according to
To
the
the
road
weather,
condition.
That our roads are wider than they've been before.
Yeah.
Well, they're
They're
wide.
not wider than they're.
They're
They're wider than
Visually,
standard,
They're
they're
wider
wider,
than
right.
MTO spec.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, they're-
Definitely not narrower,
right.
but the fact that they're wider than the requirement
yes. yeah.
is the story to like, you know, if the requirement is 6 meters. And we're at a minimum of 6.5 to 8.5.
And
Like-
why they're so deep, because people are commenting that we have the deepest ditches around, they don't need to be that deep, it's just a hazard, people are gonna get. rid of
We
it.
don't, I mean, we don't have the deepest ditches. And furthermore, like I said,
Furthermore.
it's, as soon as you remove the grass, the ditches look deep and, I mean,
Yeah.
the ditches were there, just filled in, but,
When the grass grows, they won't look as deep.
right, by the end of next summer, those ditches won't look deep. Same as Pine Lake. They said Pine Lakes were really deep. I mean, the grass is starting to grow now. It looks like a normal.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways, it's,
And it
post
is, it's a
explaining
beautiful
that we
thing
can
in the
do that.
spring
We can
when the
do that.
water.
yeah, when you can
runs.
actually watch the water run down the
Yeah,
ditches and
yeah.
not down the road,
And,
it's
yeah.
perfect.
And why, right?
Yes.
Is there a motion here?
Easy trigger. Moved by Donna, second by Neri, that the Corporate Service Committee recommends to council, oh, wrong one.
You guys didn't vote on that one yet.
Oh, you tell me to move on.
No.
All
I
in
was saying,
favor?
Did we vote on that?
All in favor? Neri.
Nary would have had us out if I remember.
I'm
Yeah.
sure he didn't finish reading it.
Well, I finished ready reading it, but anyways, moved by Neri, second by Jason, that the Corporate Service Committee meeting recommends to council to receive the quote for the backhoe sweeper attachment. And furthermore, that the submission from RJ Mac in total of the amount of $18,040 plus HST be accepted.
Okay.
And any conversation?
Well, I mean, this is just our last conversation was a great segue into this, right? And so I think the justification for this is that we've had such terrible luck with the
Contractor.
contractors, so why, this is just a no-brainer to bring this in-house.
How much have we been spending on this rebrand anyway?
$7,000, so in 2.8 years you've paid for.
2.8 years, we will have paid for this piece of equipment.
Let's see.
And get it done the way you want it.
Sure,
3.
3 years.
Thank you.
An ROI of 3
Yeah.
years on a piece of equipment,
That's gonna
It's
last how long?
absolute no-brainer when we get,
Plus
we get to,
years.
and the bonus is we get to control our own work.
Exactly.
Like, again, if we're running it like a business, it makes no sense at all to continue to spend 7,000 plus annually when to purchase one. Now that we have the backhoe and we have the, we can purchase one for 18 and change,
Yeah.
14,000 and change.
$18,040.
And we won't be limited to
Yeah.
how much we use it.
I think it's just a brilliant investment on behalf of
Yeah.
taxpayers.
Can you write, this was my idea?
Yes, I will. 100%. Okay,
Okay.
Mary, anything to say on comments?
No, I agree with it, like when we have to pay outside people and we have the machine, the equipment, why not use it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's great.
Yeah, it's just another attachment essentially. I know it's money, but
No, it's good. It's good.
you
investment.
guarantee you.
Taping a guide to the brochure.
2 years, it would pay for itself.
3, yeah, 3 essentially,
years,
yeah, it's
yeah.
7,000 a year, so.
My
So-
goodness.
All in favor? Mary. Moved by Donna, second by Mary, that the Corporate Service Committee meeting recommends the council to authorize staff to begin consultation with architects to review the layout of the municipal office with a focus on safety and efficiency.
So we didn't
Like
have
you
a
said,
report on this, but
No.
I did in the last one where we talked about the safety, we got quotes for new glass and new door, and they were extreme. And so we do need to reconfigure the layout of where the office administration is and what that looks like. They should be able to see people coming in. When we're in meetings, we should be able to
Yeah,
see,
you're back to the
yeah.
door.
so it's not as safe as it can be. Given the environment that we're in right now. And then there's also been conversations about changing the council chambers. So if we had somebody come in that could just look at, here's our building, here's what we need to do, how can we lay this out better? We sat down as staff to say, yeah, we could do this, or we could do that, or we could do that, but an architect is truly the only person that's gonna be able to tell us that this is how we can do it. Understanding that, if I will go out to an architect, I will ask for a quote, I can bring that back to you because you've seen the work that needs to be done. But I still need to keep the staff safe. So there still needs to be changes within the administration office. And I don't know if I can do something temporary or if I can, so.
Yeah, so what have we done so far? I think you put that mirror up so that you can see when someone's coming in.
Yes.
We are locking the door.
Yes.
We need to put signs up about behavior and
Yes.
what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Because I think that is important. And then can we, because there's, I think just that office that has one complete desk is hidden, that has no sight, line sight of anything that's going on outside, and it's kind of too late by the time anyone comes around.
That's why we put the mirror up, because
Okay.
then they do get to
Okay,
see,
okay,
they
good.
can see someone coming in the door.
Okay. And I don't think there's anything else to remediate, right?
Well, you can
Like
have
20,000.
some kind of, I know what we have like when someone's walking up the ramp, a bell goes off.
Yes,
You can have one
Yeah.
outside the door, so before they get to the
Chime.
door.
Even a chime on the door.
Well,
Yeah.
but even give, yeah,
Yeah.
something that dings inside that lets you know where a chime,
Yeah.
whatever,
yeah,
just
yeah,
something audible.
yeah, I like that too.
Okay.
No.
Like a.
And then we will be putting cameras up on this building, as well as in the fire hall. We don't have, and then these are the last 2 buildings that we need to put the cameras up so
Yeah.
that we can monitor the exterior as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So we'll be putting them up as well, so. And I think the lights outside, I don't think they're
Yeah,
working.
they're not.
So
Sadly.
we're
Yeah,
working
not
on
for
that too.
Okay,
No.
That street light that's right out, we got a street light right there, like, it's not very bright, like, I mean, for $300, you can get a light that'll light up the parking lot.
So look at the light. or
Yeah.
something.
Like an LED light, I just had them
Like a
put in
floodlight
my
for a shop
landfill
light
and
or-
like it light illuminates a huge area. That one up there, you
Oh,
could
that's
see
not
the
very
end in front of your
good.
face.
It's like a candle.
And it was only like,
Yeah.
it was only like $300 or $400 for the electrician to come put one in.
Yeah.
Yeah, those new LED lights were cool.
I mean, it's a concern, especially in the winter time that, you know, you walk out in the dark and you're coming in the dark and
It's too dark along the front of the building.
So we installed lights, but they obviously don't work
yeah?
now. They've stopped working. So
yeah, it's just a
we put-
solar
But they're
one.
not working.
we put a bunch of like the big spotlights up on the doors here
Oh, yeah?
in the library as well. And then some in the
Are
garden.
they motion lights?
They
or-
were, but they're obviously.
So the light out here is this, does it got a dusk to dawn sensor on it?
No, it's just got a on off, like, yeah, it would, like the nighttime, daytime.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the photo cell on it.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's what I got. So
it's
it-
not working though at all.
Yeah, but I mean, the one on the pole.
Oh, on the pole.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
one on the pole
Yeah.
and two on the building,
Well, I'm
just
telling,
till dawn, LED lights are next to nothing.
Yeah.
I'm telling you,
electricity-wise.
the one you put on the pole, I'll send you the one I bought. You can do whatever, but I'm just saying, I mean,
Well, I
you
think-
won't need any other lights if you put one up on the pole like that.
Right. Cause yeah, that, either that or better lighting above the main entrances out here, right?
I like a really bright light on the Bonfield sign would be nice, but.
We
Easy,
tried
there's
to
no money in
put
the
one on
budget.
the
Yeah, I
train.
know.
We tried
Oh,
to-
that'd be
We
nice.
tried to uplift the train, it didn't work either.
Oh, well, do we hire an electrician to do it?
It was an extension cord.
So-
Tried to save money.
I appreciate that, good effort, yeah.
All in favor on the remodel? Carried. Before we close, did we find out where we're gonna stick the public works manager?
No, we'll sit down with them.
We can.
So there's,
I mean, not stick them, but place them.
Yeah,
It's more so more so Santana needs somewhere, right? Like I could essentially work out of my truck.
If you had. to-
yeah, but if, I mean, you've got,
I'm
You had
gonna
extended
disagree because I need reports.
yes, yeah, you've got some
Well, we give them
administrative
laptop, don't
duties,
we?
yeah, yeah.
You didn't get a laptop.
Oh,
Got a desktop.
yeah, you need an office.
Break that.
Yeah, so we did talk about here, so here we would just have to bring in another line, like the phone line here would have to be transferred over. But there is Wi-Fi, there's capabilities here, we can get them hooked up. There's also the fire hall, it's underutilized for what the offices in there are. And then there's also the storage space that we have behind the case, but there's zero cabling in there. There's no. Internet, there's no phone, there's nothing, so that would probably be cost prohibitive.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I do have a call in to see what it would cost for a porta room, an office to come in, just sit at the public workshop as well, so.
but
I'll see
probably the
what that
fire hall
costs.
might be our best bet as it is.
Yeah, if we have
Yeah.
an underutilized.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can like.
And it
we
needs
can
to be
take our
upgraded
internet-
anyway, so.
We can take our internet like, off the
Yes.
building and bring it over there, then
Well, they
And the
don't have
fire hall
internet
doesn't
there?
have great internet, so that would be good.
yeah.
portable.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. I mean, is that a council decision or is that a CAO
It's an
decision?
operation.
It's a,
Yeah.
it's a staff.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. But so that you guys are all aware of what we're trying to,
Yeah,
we're trying to find the best space, but.
I mean, yeah, porter rooms, then you have to, how you have to have an electrician come in and hook it up
Yeah.
and if there's more.
Oh, well, we got a bridge to pay for, so.
Is the train on?
This one.
Is the train on?
Yeah.
The caboose seems like that.
It's in there, that'd be an awesome. one.
Okay, moved by
Let's just
Neri.
work from home. and-
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. I won't touch that one. Moved by Neri, second by Jason, that this meeting be adjourned at 8:59 o'clock. All in favor? Carried.
First time I noticed the clock.
First time it's working.
Yeah, if it's even right. I won't.